The Eagles are often hailed as one of the greatest rock bands of all time, with a legacy defined by unforgettable songs and record-breaking success. Yet behind the music, the band's story was far from serene. Despite their smooth, harmonious sound, the Eagles faced constant personal conflicts, power struggles, and rivalries, many of which nearly tore them apart, from heated arguments to highly publicized departures. The tension between bandmates often rivaled the drama of their chart-topping hits. Egos clashed. Creative differences escalated, and friendships were pushed to their limits. While their iconic music is well known, the internal strife within the band played a significant role in shaping their history. Join us as we explore the feuds and tensions behind the scenes, revealing how these conflicts shaped the Eagles' legacy. Rock and roll wasn't just about fame. It was defined by the personal and professional battles along the way. How the Eagles' 1972 debut album, Eagles, launched their iconic career in 1971 in Los Angeles. A group of musicians came together to form a band that would go on to change the course of rock music forever. The Eagles were born from a meeting between Glenn Frey, Don Henley, Bernie Leighton, and Randy Meisner. Each of them brought their own musical influences and experience to the table, and together they forged a unique sound that blended rock country and folk into something that was entirely their own. Their chemistry was instant, and their potential was undeniable. The journey for the Eagles began in the early 70s, a time when rock music was evolving and becoming more diverse. Glenn Frey, who had previously played in a band called Long Branch Pennywhistle, had already developed a sense of the type of sound he wanted to create. Don Henley, the band's future drummer and lead vocalist, was coming from a background of both country and rock influences, which would later define the Eagles' ability to blend these genres seamlessly. Bernie Leighton, an accomplished guitarist, brought his country roots to the mix, and Randy Meisner, a skilled bassist and singer, rounded out the group together. They had the perfect combination of talents to create something extraordinary in 1972. The Eagles signed with Asylum Records, a move that set the stage for their breakthrough. The label, which was LED by David Geffen, was a key player in helping the band secure the success. They would later experience that same year. The Eagles released their self-titled debut album, marking the beginning of their storied career. The album was a reflection of the band's early sound, an effortless mix of rock country and folk. It was not long before the Eagles began to gain attention, thanks in part to their ability to write catchy, memorable songs that resonated with a wide audience. One of the album's standout tracks, Take It Easy, became an instant hit and is often regarded as the song that put the Eagles on the map. Written by Frey Jackson Brown and Glenn's friend J.D. Souther, Take It Easy became a quintessential anthem of the 1970s. The song's catchy melody and laid-back vibe captured the essence of the Southern California lifestyle, and it quickly earned the Eagles a following. The song became a top 10 hit on the Billboard Hot 100 and established the band's signature sound, something that would become their hallmark for years to come. But while Take It Easy was undoubtedly the standout track, the album as a whole set the foundation for what would become the Eagles' signature style. The band was able to incorporate elements of rock, folk, and country in a way that was both accessible and unique. The self-titled debut showcased not just their ability to write infectious tunes, but also their musical versatility. Songs like Witchy Woman, with its haunting melody and peaceful, easy feeling, which had an effortless and soothing vibe, further solidified the band's place in the rock landscape. The success of their debut album was pivotal for the Eagles, but it was also the beginning of their evolution as they began to gain traction in the industry. the band members started to push themselves creatively, experimenting with new sounds and production techniques that would become characteristic of their later work. Despite the challenges of being a young band, trying to navigate the complexities of the music industry, the Eagles were able to maintain a sense of cohesion and focus that allowed them to continue producing music that would resonate with fans for decades to come. The band's ability to combine the laid-back sensibilities of country with the energy of rock was a huge part of their early success. Their sound felt fresh yet familiar, and it connected with listeners who were drawn to both the lyrical content and the musical arrangements. The Eagles' songs weren't just catchy. They told stories, painting pictures of life in the American West, love, heartbreak, and the pursuit of freedom. Their lyrics had a depth and relatability that made them stand out in an era when music was starting to reflect more introspective and personal themes. The famous One of These Nights and Hotel California, after their groundbreaking debut in 1972, the Eagles quickly solidified their place in rock history with the success of their self-titled album, and its standout tracks. The band was ready to build on that momentum. In 1975, they released One of These Nights, an album that marked a turning point in their sound and success. This record was a clear reflection of their growth. As a band, both musically and commercially, it introduced a more polished, radio-friendly version of their country rock sound, with elements of pop and soft rock. Starting to shine through One of These Nights became an immediate commercial success, helping the Eagles solidify their status as one of the biggest bands of the 70s. It was clear that they were no longer just a group of talented musicians. They had become cultural icons. The album was packed with hits that would go on to become staples in the Eagles' catalog, including Lion Eyes. And Take It to the Limit, Lion Eyes was a particularly notable track. It became the band's third one hit on the Billboard Easy Listening chart, and demonstrated the band's knack for crafting songs with both emotional depth and mainstream appeal. The song's mellow country influence was a perfect fit for the band's growing popularity among a wide audience. Another standout from One of These Nights was Take It to the Limit, a song that became one of the Eagles' most beloved anthems, written by Randy Meisner. The track showcased the band's ability to blend rock with elements of country and folk seamlessly. It was an ambitious song with a soaring chorus and an emotional intensity that resonated deeply with listeners. The song's success helped propel One of These Nights to platinum status and marked the beginning of the Eagles' peak years in terms of commercial and critical success as the band rode the wave of success. From One of These Nights, 1976, brought the release of what would become their most iconic album, Hotel California. It's a record that not only solidified the Eagles' legacy in rock history, but also defined the sound of the 1970s with Hotel California. The Eagles embraced a more refined, polished sound, bringing in influences from pop rock and a bit of Latin and jazz, to create something that felt both timeless and ahead of its time. This album would forever change the landscape of rock music and solidify the Eagles' place at the top of the charts. The title track, Hotel California, became one of the band's most enduring songs, instantly recognizable for its haunting melody and cryptic lyrics. The song's eerie atmosphere, combined with its iconic guitar solo, made it a staple in rock music. Hotel California resonated with fans on multiple levels. It was both an introspective commentary on excess and a representation of the disillusionment that came with fame. The song's popularity was undeniable. It reached No. 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and has since been ranked as one of the greatest rock songs of all time. It became a defining anthem of the 70s, and even today it remains one of the most recognizable songs in the Eagles' catalog. One of the most interesting aspects of Hotel California was the band's evolution in terms of its lineup. by the time the album was recorded, there had been some significant changes. Bernie Layton, who had been one of the founding members, had left the band before the album's recording and was replaced by Joe Walsh, a seasoned guitarist who brought a new dynamic to the Eagles. Sound Walsh's influence on Hotel California is evident especially in the track life in the Fast Lane, which features his signature guitar work and a more rock-oriented sound. Walsh's arrival injected a fresh energy into the band and helped shape the sound of their future projects. Hotel California not only cemented the Eagles' status as superstars, but also had a lasting cultural impact. It became more than just an album. It was an event. Its success was fueled by the band's ability to capture the essence of the 70s rock scene. While staying true to their roots, the album earned the Eagles their first Grammy Award for Record of the Year in 1978. And the impact of Hotel California can still be felt today. The record is widely regarded as one of the greatest albums of all time, and remains a staple in the rock music canon. The tension between Glenn Frey and Don Henley and the Eagles, breakup by the late 1970s. The Eagles were one of the most successful and influential bands in the world. Their 1976 album, Hotel California, had solidified their place in rock history, and their fame reached new heights with every passing year. However, as the band's success grew, so did the tension within the group. The tight-knit dynamic that had initially brought them together began to fray as personal struggles and creative differences surfaced. Particularly between Glenn Frey and Don Henley, Frey and Henley had always been the driving forces behind the Eagles, with both men contributing key elements to the band's sound and success. Frey, with his strong lead vocals and sharp songwriting, was the more extroverted member, while Henley brought his poetic lyrics and smooth yet powerful vocal style together. They had crafted some of the most enduring hits of the 70s. But as time went on, their relationship began to deteriorate. What had once been a productive partnership started to turn into a power struggle. Creative differences were at the heart of much of the discord fray, and Henley had distinct musical visions. And while they both understood the commercial appeal of the Eagle sound, they often disagreed about the direction in which the band should head. Frey wanted to take the band in a more rock-oriented direction, while Henley's inclinations leaned more toward introspective and often politically charged songwriting. These differences led to a growing sense of frustration on both sides as the band members struggled to find common ground. But it wasn't just creative tension that was driving the band apart. The personal struggles between Frey and Henley were also contributing to the discontent. As the years went by, both men became increasingly difficult to work with the pressures of fame. The long hours on the road and the constant media scrutiny had begun to take their toll. Reports surfaced of heated arguments with Frey and Henley, often at the center of the disagreements. The rift wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal, and it was starting to affect the rest of the band as well. While Frey and Henley were the primary sources of the tension, other band members, such as Joe Walsh and Timothy B. Schmidt, were also affected by the growing animosity. Walsh, who had joined the band in 1975, had already been a part of several high-profile bands, and he found himself caught in the middle. Of the conflict, Schmidt too had been with the Eagles for several years. But like Walsh, he was a newer member compared to Frey Henley and the original members. As the band's dynamics shifted, it became clear that the Eagles were no longer functioning as the cohesive unit they once were in 1980, following a period of mounting internal tensions and personal conflicts. The Eagles parted ways, an announcement that surprised many fans and marked the end of an era for the band. The decision seemed inevitable given the mounting tension within the group, but it still sent shockwaves through the music world. The band had been at the peak of their success, and their breakup seemed sudden and dramatic, leaving fans wondering how such a seemingly tight-knit group could fracture so quickly. The breakup was not just a private matter, it was a media spectacle. The press had already been following the band closely due to their immense popularity, and now the announcement of their split became headline news. The public was captivated by the idea that a band known for creating harmonious music could fall apart in such a dramatic fashion. But behind the scenes, the reasons for the breakup were far from clear-cut. And this ambiguity only added to the controversy. Both Frey and Henley gave interviews in which they offered contradictory statements about the cause of the split. Frey reportedly placed much of the blame on Henley, citing his increasing control over the band's direction and decision-making process. Frey, ever the outspoken member, expressed frustration with Henley's domineering presence, and what he perceived as Henley's attempt to take full creative control for Frey. The split was a necessary step to reclaim his own voice and creative freedom. On the other hand, Henley offered his own perspective, which painted a different picture. Henley suggested that Frey's ego and constant desire for control were the primary sources of conflict within the band. According to Henley, the tension had been building for years, and the final straw had been Frey's insistence on dictating the band's sound and direction. Henley also hinted at Frey's personal struggles, suggesting that these might have been contributing to his behavior and increasing frustration with the band's dynamics. The two bandmates, it seemed, were at odds on almost every front. The public's reaction to the breakup was one of shock and disbelief. Fans couldn't understand how a band that had created some of the most beloved rock songs of the 70s could disband so suddenly and acrimoniously. But the truth was that the Eagles' success had come at a great cost, and the pressure to maintain that level of fame and creativity had begun to take its toll. The band had pushed themselves to the limit, both personally and professionally, and eventually they had cracked under the strain, post-breakup solo careers, and reunion after the Eagles parted ways. The band members each pursued their own paths. Their individual journeys through the 1980s would prove to be just as eventful and creatively significant as their time together. While the tension between Glenn Frey and Don Henley continued to make headlines, both musicians found success in their respective solo careers, and the Eagles' influence remained undeniable. In the wake of the breakup, Glenn Frey quickly began to carve out a successful solo career. In 1982, he released his debut solo album No Fun Allowed, which showcased his knack for crafting catchy radio-friendly tunes. The album's success marked a new chapter for Frey, demonstrating his ability to stand on his own tracks like The One You Love. And I found Somebody resonated with listeners, proving that Frey had more to offer beyond his work with the Eagles. His blend of rock and pop sounds continued to earn him commercial success throughout the 1980s, and he remained a prominent figure in the music scene. Meanwhile, Don Henley's solo career took off in a big way. His 1984 album, Building the Perfect Beast, was both a critical and commercial triumph. The album produced several hit singles, but none more iconic than Boys of Summer, which became an anthem of the 1980s. The song's introspective lyrics, combined with Henley's distinctive voice, and the track's unforgettable hook, made it a massive hit. Henley's ability to blend rock with a more reflective, almost melancholic style struck a chord with listeners, and the album's success solidified his place as one of the era's most influential solo artists. Henley would go on to release more successful solo albums throughout the decade, maintaining his position as a highly respected figure in music. Despite their individual success, the Eagles continued to be a subject of discussion in the media throughout the 1980s. The band's internal feuds, particularly the strained relationship between Frey and Henley, remained a central talking point. The press often speculated about the possibility of a reunion, and fans continued to hold out hope for a return of the band's original magic. However, the rivalry between Frey and Henley cast a shadow over any potential reconciliation in interviews. Both members were often candid about their past struggles, and their ongoing tension was widely documented, making the Eagles story one of the most controversial and talked about in rock music. The 1980s were also a time when the legacy of the Eagles was firmly cemented, while the band's time together in the 1970s had been marked by internal strife. Their music remained beloved by millions. The Eagles' albums continued to sell, and their classic hits such as Hotel California, Take It Easy, and Desperado were played on the radio regularly as one of the most successful acts of the 1970s. The Eagles became synonymous with both the glory and the chaos of that era. They were often cited as one of the best-selling and most influential bands in rock history, even as their members navigated the complexities of their solo careers and personal conflicts by the early 1990s. The tension between Frey and Henley had not diminished, but the idea of a reunion was still tantalizing. Fans continued to hope for a return of the band, and the press speculated about the possibility of the Eagles coming together, once again in 1994. The unthinkable happened. The Eagles announced their reunion with the Hell Freezes Over tour, a highly anticipated event that became a significant moment in the band's history. And in the broader world of rock music, the phrase Hell Freezes Over was coined by Don Henley during an interview when he jokingly said that the band would never get back together. But when the reunion was finally confirmed, it became one of the most highly anticipated events in music. The announcement of the reunion was met with both excitement and skepticism. Fans were thrilled by the prospect of seeing the Eagles together again, but the history of personal and creative conflicts between Frey and Henley left many wondering if the reunion would be short-lived. The tensions between the two were well documented, and there was uncertainty about how they would coexist on stage, after years of bitterness. But despite the challenges, the Eagles reunited for a tour that would reintroduce their music to a new generation of fans, while reigniting the passion of their long-time followers. The Hell Freezes Over tour became a massive success, attracting large crowds and generating substantial media attention. However, the underlying tension between Frey and Henley never fully disappeared in interviews and during performances. It was evident that the two men had not entirely resolved their differences. In 1998, the Eagles released Hell Freezes over a live album recorded during their reunion tour. The album was a massive success, debuting at number 1 on the Billboard 200, and further solidifying the band's place in rock history. The album featured live renditions of their classic hits, as well as new tracks like Get Over It and Love Will Keep Us Alive. The success of the album, combined with the success of the tour, marked the band's full-fledged return to the spotlight after a 14-year hiatus. Felder's lawsuit and departure in the years following the Eagles reunion, the band continued to experience both success and controversy. However, one of the most significant and contentious moments in the band's later years came in 2001, when longtime guitarist Don Felder was dismissed from the band. His departure would not only mark a major turning point for the Eagles, but also lead to one of the most publicized legal battles in rock history. Felder had been a key member of the Eagles since the early 1970s, contributing to the band's distinctive sound with his guitar work on classics like Hotel California and Life in the Fast Lane. However, by the early two, tensions between Felder and the other members of the band, particularly Don Henley and Glenn Frey, had escalated. The once harmonious relationship between the bandmates had become strained and personal, and professional differences began to surface. The events that led to Felder's dismissal were highly publicized in 2001. The guitarist was informed that he was being let go from the Eagles, but the manner in which it happened sparked significant controversy. The decision was announced publicly, and both Felder and the band offered conflicting accounts of what led to his departure. According to Felder, his dismissal was unfair and politically motivated, rooted in power struggles within the band. He claimed that his dismissal was related to a contract dispute, where he had been denied a larger share of the band's profits. He also alleged that Henley and Frey were trying to gain more control over the band's finances, sidling him in the process. In response, Henley and Frey stated that Felder's dismissal was due to his behavior and attitude, which they said had become increasingly problematic. They accused him of not being a team player and of causing tension within the band. According to Henley and Frey, Felder's behavior had been disruptive, and his departure was necessary for the band's future. Despite the differing accounts, the public nature of the dispute led to a media frenzy, with fans and journalists alike speculating about the true reasons behind Felder's exit. Felder, in turn, filed a lawsuit against Henley, Frey and the Eagles' management. His lawsuit alleged wrongful termination, claiming that he had been unfairly dismissed from the band without cause, and that his firing violated his contract. He also accused the band of breaching fiduciary duties and withholding payments that he was rightfully owed. The legal battle quickly became one of the most talked about stories in rock music, drawing attention not only for the personal animosity between the band members, but also for the financial and contractual disputes at its core. The lawsuit became a major scandal, attracting the attention of the media and the public. It shed light on the inner workings of one of the biggest bands in rock history and revealed the tension that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. Fans were shocked to hear about the deep rifts between Felder and the other Eagles members, especially given the band's reputation for producing iconic music together. It was a stark contrast to the image of unity and collaboration that the Eagles had cultivated during their most successful years. After several years of legal wrangling, the lawsuit was eventually settled out of court in 2007. While the details of the settlement were not made public, Felder did not return to the band after the legal resolution. The settlement allowed the Eagles to continue performing, but Felder was no longer a part of the group, and his absence was felt by both the band and their fans. His departure marked the end of an era for the Eagles, as Felder had been one of the key contributors to the band's sound. Especially during the 1970s, Frey's death continued legacy, and recent legal issues, following the dramatic departure of Don Feldner and the band's ongoing legacy. The Eagles faced an even greater challenge with the passing of Glenn Frey in 2016. Frey, one of the founding members of the band, passed away on January 18th, 2016, at the age of 67. His death was attributed to complications from rheumatoid arthritis, acute ulcerative colitis, and pneumonia, which had significantly affected his health. In the years leading up to his passing, Frey's death marked the end of an era for the Eagles and left a profound void in the band, the loss of Glenn Frey led, to a mixture of emotions within the band's community. There was an outpouring of praise for Frey's immense contribution to the music world, both as a member of the Eagles and as a songwriter. His distinctive voice, alongside his partnership with Don Henley, was instrumental in creating some of the most iconic songs of the 1970s, such as Hotel California, Take It Easy, and Desperado. However, Frey's death sparked discussion among fans and critics about how the remaining Eagles members would proceed with the band's future. In 2017, the Eagles made the decision to continue performing and touring, but they would do so without Frey at the forefront to fill the void. The band enlisted Vince Gill, a seasoned country music artist, and Deacon Frey Glenn's son, to join the lineup. The decision to bring in these replacements was met with mixed reactions from fans and critics alike. While some embraced the band's efforts to keep the Eagles' legacy alive, others felt that replacing Glenn Frey was a step too far. Many fans expressed their dissatisfaction with the notion of continuing the Eagles without one of its founding members, especially given the personal connection and history Frey had with the band's music. The Eagles continued to tour in the 20s, performing for large audiences worldwide and focusing on their iconic catalog of hits. However, despite the band's ongoing success, controversy surrounding their legacy persisted. Some fans were uncomfortable with how the Eagles had approached the idea of replacing original members, particularly in the case of Glenn Frey. For many, the band's legacy was inseparable from the original lineup, and the idea of continuing without Frey was seen as compromising the integrity of the band. These concerns were further fueled by the frequent changes in the band's lineup, with various members rotating in and out over the years, leading to questions about what the Eagles had become in the wake of their storied history. The continued touring and the involvement of new members raised even more questions about the band's authenticity and future, while Henley Walsh and Schmidt defended the band's legacy and their decisions. The Eagles were not immune to criticism. Fans who had followed the band for decades were conflicted about seeing the group without its iconic lead singer and one of its key creative forces. The issue of replacing Glenn Frey and the ongoing changes in the lineup seemed to create a divide between the band's original fan base and a new generation of listeners who were simply looking to enjoy the music, irrespective of who was on stage.